Hello and welcome to Movies You Missed podcast. We are getting into the swing of 2025. We started the year off with a bang, as we always like to do here at Movies You Missed. How you doing today, John?
Doing pretty good, V. How are you?
I'm doing great. Really excited to talk about these buddy comedies today.
Oh yeah, same.
And we hope you all are excited as well. Thank you all for joining us. And if you are new to Movies You Missed podcast, we are John and V, two industry veterans who worked in the film industry for over 25 years together. And now we love to discuss movies every week and recommend them to you without spoiling them.
No spoilers here.
That's right, and we love to pick movies that have either gone under the radar, were super underrated, or that we just love to talk about because they're some of our all-time faves. The movies this week certainly fall into that latter category.
I would say so.
And we also love to discuss the new movies we've seen in theaters or on streaming this week.
Yes, one of my favorite bits of Movies You Missed podcast.
Mine too, and I'm wondering if you saw any this week.
I actually ended up watching 2 movies this week.
Nice.
I ended up watching Night Bitch, directed by Mariel Heller, written by Mariel Heller, based on the novel by Rachel Yoder, starring Amy Adams.
Yeah, I've heard mixed reviews about that movie, that it's a bit weird.
Oh, it's definitely weird.
Okay.
That is for sure. But, you know, I liked it. It kind of falls along the lines of early Universal horror. And it falls along the lines of the female werewolf perspective. So I really enjoyed it. It's not super violent or anything like that, but I laughed a lot. I had a lot of empathy for Amy Adams' character, and I thought that this movie was pretty fantastic.
Great. I'm so glad to hear. Do you think that I would enjoy it?
I think you would. I think
Okay.
a lot of people would enjoy it because not only is Amy Adams just fantastic in almost every regard. I mean, we've talked about her with Enchanted, Arrival. This movie, I would say within the first 10 minutes, I got a little skeptical, but fully pulled me in, and I think it's definitely one of the best of the year.
Wow, okay, we'll add it to the watch list.
Yeah, you definitely should. Other than that, I ended up watching The Instigators, directed by Doug Liman, who we all know is the director of The Bourne Identity. This film actually stars Matt Damon and Casey Affleck and Jake Harlow and Hong Chow. This movie was a lot of fun. It's nothing we haven't seen before, but still, a lot of laughs, a lot of great action, a fantastic car chase sequence like we just discussed in Ronin. Yes, I would highly recommend this movie. Ron Perlman's also in it,
Nice.
as is Toby Jones.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, the cast is stacked. V, I remember texting you, be like, this is a stacked cast. Mm-hmm. This is a movie definitely worth watching. Again, you've seen it before, but it's a lot of fun. So give The Instigators a shot. It's on Apple TV. You can rent it or just watch it if you have an Apple TV subscription.
Awesome, okay.
Yes, that is what I watched. So, V, I'm very curious what you watched.
I watched a movie that was released earlier in 2024, a movie that you and my sister Shannon have insisted that I give it a try, and I'm glad that I waited because I wasn't a huge fan of this actor until a little bit later in the year.
Okay.
It stars Glenn Powell, it's produced by Netflix, and is directed by Richard Linklater.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know which one you're talking about.
it's Hitman.
Yes!
A movie that you're a big fan of, and I really enjoyed it. It's quirky, but I absolutely loved Glenn Powell in this. Like I said, I'm glad I waited until after I was a fan of him, because just from Maverick, I was like, okay, he's a pretty boy. But then watching him in Twisters, I was actually kind of impressed. He is a good leading man.
Right?
And so then I watched Hitman, and God, I love it when actors play a whole bunch of characters in a movie. I think it's so fun, and him playing 10 different roles was so great. It really displayed his talents, and he does have talent. And it's a very quirky film because it is a Richard Linklater film, but I had a lot of fun with it, and I definitely recommend it. Like I said, it's on Netflix right now, and I'm really glad that you made me watch it.
Oh, I'm so glad. I had such a great time with that movie. Hitman was a lot of fun.
It is. Yeah. And so that's what I watched this week.
Fantastic. That's a great way to lead into 2025.
Thanks. Yeah, I was happy with it.
Beautiful.
All right, now to get into the movies we picked this week. This episode's theme is all about buddy comedies, and and these 2 films are led by some pretty iconic actors, legends in the industry, men who we really love, and I can't wait to talk about both of these films this week.
Oh yeah, likewise.
And because this is an odd episode, I believe you go first.
That's true. I do go first, and oddly enough, my film is several years before yours, so we are going in chronological order again.
Yes, love when that happens.
As do I. So let's jump right into it. From 1988, this film comes to us. This film was a remake, actually. The remake screenplay was written by Dale Launer. The original screenplay, titled Bedtime Story, was written by Stanley Shapiro and Paul Henning. This film stars Steve Martin, Michael Caine, Glenn Headley, Anton Rogers, Barbara Harris, Ian McDiarmid. This film is directed by the great Frank Oz. If you don't know him by name, we'll get into him in just a little bit. This film is titled Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
A movie I've been watching since I was about 10 years old.
Oh, wow. I only recently saw it within the last 10 years. My wife is a major fan. She brought her DVD copy into our household and introduced me to this movie. I want to say within the first year of us actually living together.
Good for her. I'm glad she introduced you to this movie.
Oh, as am I. It was a great first-time watch for me when Amy introduced it to me several years ago, and we've watched it together, I want to say, another like 2 or 3 times. So This movie's definitely been one of those... I always like to rewatch movies that Amy introduced me to because they're movies that she doesn't get tired of and movies that she doesn't always say, didn't you just watch that?
Yeah.
So it's always fun to revisit. She did watch it with me this time around because, again, this is one of her favorite films. Steve Martin and Michael Caine play off each other so fantastically in this movie. But before we get into all of that and the behind-the-scenes making of this movie and the beautiful locations that they were able to shoot in for this movie, I'll break it down for you without any spoilers. This movie is centered on Lawrence and Freddie. Lawrence is a bit of a con man, as is Freddie. Freddie's a little bit of an up-and-coming con man. Lawrence and Freddie meet on a train just by happenstance. They're on their way to the French Riviera. The real reason they meet is because Lawrence starts to eavesdrop on Freddie while Freddie is trying to con a woman into buying him dinner. And the scene is great. The way it moves along and the way it's edited is fantastic. And Steve Martin just delivers laugh after laugh in this opening sequence. And I love the cutaways to Lawrence, played by Michael Caine, because Michael Caine's look in this movie is very different from how he's looked in every other movie. His mustache is ridiculous, and his hair slicked back is kind of ridiculous too. But in a way, you can kind of just tell that he's a bit of a greaseball, a little bit of a sleazy, SOB. And that's actually how we're introduced to Lawrence right at the beginning of this movie. He cons a woman into giving him this really big, huge pearl necklace, saying that he needs money to fight, help freedom fighters and help the people of his country. So he's playing off that he's some piece of royalty somewhere in Europe. After this dinner and introduction to Freddie, Lawrence and Freddie do finally meet. They're in the sleeper car together. Freddie starts to kind of drop, where he's going, where he thinks that there's going to be a lot of rich women that he can take for their money, and Lawrence is kind of just going along with it. He's like, oh, I'm a married man, I've got a wife and daughter at home. Lawrence is just kind of letting him run his mouth, and he's, obviously we know who Lawrence is, and Freddie has no idea who Lawrence is. So they end up running into each other a couple of days later in the French Riviera and start to put together that these two are, in a way, already at some sort of competition with each other. And Lawrence, being who he is, we find out that he actually lives a very lavish lifestyle because, of course, he is a con man and is able to con a lot of women into giving him magnificent pieces of jewelry and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the first time I watched this movie and started to put a little bit more of who Lawrence is together, I romanticized the guy a little bit, and I was like, damn, wouldn't that be one hell of a way to live your life? You just con people into giving you a shit ton of money.
Yes, but the reason why we can actually romanticize this a little bit with Lawrence is because he's very meticulous about researching all of the women that he cons, and he says that a little bit later on in the movie, that he only goes after rich, corrupt women who
right,
deserve to be parted from a little bit of their money.
Yeah. And hey, why not? To an extent, I would love to do that to Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or, Bill Gates or something like that. They're probably a lot smarter than me and probably wouldn't fall for it, but you never know. I'm also not a beautiful woman.
That's probably stopping you the most.
Very likely. So as we learn a little bit more about Lawrence, Freddie starts to also learn a little bit more about Lawrence, and this is when Freddie has a proposition for Lawrence that maybe Lawrence can take Freddie under his wing and teach him the ropes of being a confidence man. Lawrence decides that, you know what, why not? Let's see what we can come up with and what kind of con man I can mold you into. Gives him some stipulations that whatever he says goes. Got to dress a certain way. He's got to walk a certain way. He's got to walk the walk. He's got to talk the talk.
That's a great montage.
Yeah, it really is. And I love that montage, too, especially with the camera just sitting facing the pool. Mm-hmm. Like, how much fun was that day of shooting?
Well, and also the soundtrack for the montage is Putting on the Ritz, which is great.
Yes, I know. That was so awesome. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to to it. I'm like, oh, that's totally putting on the Ritz. Of course, then I started thinking about Young Frankenstein, and then I, had to channel back into Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. So after weeks of Lawrence teaching Freddy the ropes, and Freddy decides that he can go out on his own and run his own show. And this little section of Lawrence's world where he does his conning is Beaumont-sur-Mer. So Freddy's like, oh, you know what? I'm going to go to a different country, and, thanks for all the help. Decides to leave. But he also doesn't decide to leave almost immediately because he feels that he might be able to one-up Lawrence in his next con. So they end up pretty much going head-to-head with each other for a little while. One thing leads to another, and they find out that the daughter of Colgate is now coming into town, and she's got hundreds of millions of dollars that they might be able to con her out of. They decide to make a wager on who can actually con her first. They put a cap of $50,000. If one of them can get it before the other one is the better con man. At this point, this is when we are introduced to Glenn Headley. She plays Janet Colgate. And for the rest of the movie, we are along for the ride while Freddy and Lawrence battle each other to try and get this $50,000 from Janet Colgate to see who is going to ultimately be kicked out of Beaumont-sur-Mer. And we are treated to hysterical moments after hysterical moments. There's stuff early on in this movie that I had forgotten about. I remember the whole moment where Lawrence has Freddy play Ruprecht, which is, of course, one of the most famous scenes in this whole movie. I want to say it's been a solid 3-ish years since I've seen this movie, and I forgot how hysterical majority of this movie is all the way through. It was a great revisit for me. Sounds like, V, you've definitely been watching it a lot longer than I have.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm curious how your revisit of however many times this was for you was.
It was a hysterical time, just like every other opportunity I take to watch this fantastic comedy. I've been watching it since I was about 10 years old, so I've seen it numerous times over the years. And I just love it so much. And I too hadn't seen it in several years, so it was a good time to revisit it. And agreed,
Nice.
There were a couple things that I'd forgotten about it too, even though I've been watching it for so many years. And
yeah.
like in the beginning when Freddy's arrested and he's trying to think of Lawrence's name.
Oh, that sequence, it was killing me. Apparently that whole thing was improvised by Steve Martin.
Oh my God. I wonder if it was the inspiration for the Dumb and Dumber scene with Samsonite.
I wouldn't put it past the Farley brothers to pay homage to this movie with
Right?
that scene. Definitely.
And I still quote this movie to this day. I mean, Lady Fanny from Omaha.
Yeah.
all the time. And everything from that scene with Ruprecht, especially
Oh
as
my
I've
gosh.
gotten older, I understand that scene a lot more. So it's like,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
what did we do when Uncle Ted came over?
Oh,
It's
my
so
gosh.
messed
She
up.
puts the glove on
Oh.
after that.
We apologize. Of course,
Ugh.
yes, Steve Martin running around banging the pot. Oklahoma, Oklahoma, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma? Yeah. I thought it was North Dakota, so I was sitting here and I was looking at Amy, and right before the movie started, I was like, North Dakota, North Dakota, North Dakota. And she's looking at me like,
You're insane.
what? Like, yeah. And then when it happened, I looked at her and I was like, you could have corrected me. She goes, nope. I was like, okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
That's awesome.
She goes, I know this movie more than you. I'm like, yeah, I guess you do.
Ooh, that's a good burn.
It was a good burn. I love the whole thing, too, when he's introducing Freddy as Ruprecht to these other women. Not mother.
Yeah. Why does he
That
have a
stuff is
cork on
great.
the end of his forehead?
Yeah. Oh, when he starts to eat the applesauce, that's one of Amy's, she hates that scene. She
Oh.
always has to look away.
It's gross.
It's so funny.
He's like, excuse me, may I go to the bathroom first?
Oh, yeah.
But that's the thing, is that they're vying for who is the funniest, and I think this is
Yeah.
where it works really successfully versus, I would say, like Batman Forever, where Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey are vying for who's the silliest and campiest and funniest, and that
Sure.
really didn't work because they were two totally different villains. But this does, and there are scenes where Steve Martin is completely stealing the show, and he's so funny.
Oh, yeah.
Both scenes where he's complaining about people dancing.
Oh, my, I was just going to say, when he and Glenn Headley are hanging out and he starts talking about the whole thing with the dancing, that just, oh, wow. I completely forgot about all that. I forgot about the whole wheelchair thing. I forgot about the doctor that he talks about. It's like, oh, the bill is $50,000. Oh, man.
Dr. Emil Schofhausen.
That's it, yeah.
No, I can't feel a thing. And he's just like whipping the crap out of his legs.
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh.
And Michael Caine comes in and one-ups him and goes toe-to-toe with Steve Martin for this comedic genius. And if you enjoyed, which it's funny enough, it's going to be on the list in the future, it's going to be a future pick of mine. If you enjoy Michael Caine and Miss Congeniality, you will absolutely love this film.
Oh, I completely agree, yes. Because it feels like now that I just recently watched Miss Congeniality and rewatching this, it's like there's a lot of similarities to his character in Miss Congeniality.
He's definitely very sassy in both movies.
That is for sure, yeah.
These are my two favorite roles of his.
Oh, awesome. I would say it's definitely one of the funnier ones that I've seen him in. And he's done a good amount of comedies. A lot of them haven't landed so well. Like I actually really like him as Austin Powers' father, Nigel, in Goldmember. I know you don't like Goldmember, but I think Michael Caine adds a really hilarious charm to Goldmember. Definitely Miss Congeniality. I was not a big fan of Bewitched. I know he plays Nicole Kidman's dad
that's
in
a
that
terrible movie.
Yeah, it's a really bad movie. But Michael Caine's just been around for so long, and also majority of the last 25, 30 years, he's really only done dramatic roles. You know, obviously playing Alfred in the Dark Knight trilogy. And even beyond that, like the Cider House Rules, and he's also in a movie called Harry Brown, which I have not seen, but it's supposed to be a really badass revenge flick, so maybe we'll have to check that out at some point together.
Oh, you know how much I love revenge movies.
I do indeed, yes. So Michael Caine, obviously, great actor, been around a long time, been nominated for an Oscar or two. Steve Martin, gotta love the guy also. I mean, beyond Saturday Night Live, I'm a big fan of the Father of the Bride movies. My wife and I absolutely love Only Murders in the Building with him and Martin Short. We just recently talked about Steve Martin and Alec Baldwin hosting the Oscars. I love The Jerk, a big fan of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Sergeant Bilko's entertaining. And I know we just recently talked about the Pink Panther movies that he was in, which I have not seen. But this is actually one of his other collaborations with Frank Oz, because Steve Martin was in the hysterical movie about making an independent movie starring Eddie Murphy and Steve Martin, Bowfinger, which if you have not seen Bowfinger, you got to check that movie out.
He's been hilarious since the 80s, and I loved him in the movie Roxanne with Daryl Hannah.
Oh, yeah, Roxanne. I did see that one, too. Yeah, Roxanne was pretty good.
Did I ever tell you
this? Big nose.
Yeah, he's got the huge nose. Did I ever tell you the story about Prom and Steve Martin?
No, you didn't tell me about Prom and Steve Martin.
When I was in elementary school, I had a speech therapist, and I've actually become friends with her now. Her name was Jean Mann. She's awesome. And she actually went to prom with Steve Martin and his friend. It was a double date. They really enjoyed their time together, and they dated for a brief amount of time. And
oh, wow.
One date, the four of them actually went out to a drive-in movie theater. The two guys, Steve Martin and this friend, went to get snacks, and so they left the car. And the girls did what teenage girls do, which is automatically talk about each other's boyfriends. And so my friend Jean Mann was talking about Steve, and her friend was talking about her boyfriend, and sharing, little tidbits and everything. And Steve Martin and his friend come back. Steve reaches under the seat, pulls out a tape recorder, and pushes stop on the record button.
No. That's pretty damn funny. That's clever.
Legend.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Martin is the man. He just seems like a really awesome dude.
Yeah.
And that's all I've ever heard about him. I've never had the opportunity to work with him, or I've just heard that they're both awesome guys, and they were, for years, trying to work on a project together. So both of them have said in the documentary on the DVD of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels that it was a dream come true for them to finally get to work together.
Oh, fantastic. And I love that Steve Martin plays the banjo.
Yeah, and he's really good at it, too.
Really good, yeah.
He is. He's good. I actually just recently sent a video of him playing the Harry Potter theme to my wife because she loves Harry Potter.
Aww.
And it's pretty badass. I'll have to send it to you.
Yes, and there are a bunch of other movies that Steve Martin and Michael Caine have been in separately now, of course. But
yes,
both of them have careers and credits that we are going to touch on in the future. I know that there are several movies from both of them that are on each other's lists.
Oh, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing more of them. I mentioned Glenn Headley was in this movie. If you don't know her by name, she was a great character actress. I recognized her most from Mr. Holland's Opus. She plays Richard Dreyfuss's wife in that movie. She was also in Babe, Pig in the City as a voice. She's in Sergeant Bilko with Steve Martin, this was their reuniting after almost 10 years since shooting Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Nice.
Yes, she was also in a really terrible but still entertaining movie starring Martin Lawrence and John Leguizamo and Danny DeVito called What's the Worst That Could Happen?
Oh my God, I saw that movie once in the 90s.
I've seen it like 3 times. It's not good, but it's one of those I'll throw it on type of movies.
It's a TNT film.
Definitely. Yeah. I wouldn't change the channel. She was just a lot of fun to watch in this movie.
I will always remember her as Tess Trueheart in the Dick Tracy movie.
That's right. You were talking about that, and Dick Tracy is on my future list, and I have not seen Dick Tracy in like 30 years, so I'm looking forward to revisiting that one.
I'm really excited for that episode because I'm pairing it with The Rocketeer.
Yes, it's going to be a great episode.
Yes.
One other actor I'll get into before I jump into more of the BTS, Ian McDiarmid. If you don't know him by name, you would know him by face, because he is the Emperor and Senator Palpatine in the Star Wars movies. And he's got a small role in this movie, but there's one scene where he... I love it so much.
He's really good in this film.
Yeah, Freddy gets wheeled into the house because he's trying to play off that he's somehow crippled. I don't want to get too much into it, don't spoil it, but the line that Ian McDiarmid gives him right as Michael Caine and Glenn Headley leave the screen is fantastic, and I love the way he delivers it. Now, I know I mentioned earlier that the scene in the jail where Steve Martin's trying to come up with his name was improvised. According to Steve Martin and Michael Caine, and including Frank Oz, a large percent of this movie was all ad-libbed by both of these guys.
Oh, fantastic.
I know. It makes me so happy to know that this is how funny that they can be, obviously following the guideline of a script, but having free reign, especially Frank Oz, I got to talk about his credits in just a second, which will take forever, but I'll cut them down a little bit. It's just so awesome. And Frank Oz, on the documentary, he was talking about how nobody really can direct comedy. It's just something that kind of has to start flowing on set, and something that you just kind of sit back and relax and let the actors take the charge. And that's what he said he did. And he said that he didn't really have a whole lot of directing to do. He doesn't like to get on set and tell actors, block them too much and have them stand in one corner and do this and do that. He likes to let them feel the scene out, and they shoot it based off of how the rehearsal goes and how the actors feel that they would block it themselves if they were these people, which is one of my favorite things about a lot of directors. It's like you get on set, and I've seen it happen before on a lot of TV shows that I worked on. Directors, you let them feel it out, and you kind of direct the camera movements more than you direct the cast. And if that's how it's working out on set, a lot of times that's when you get the best stuff.
I absolutely agree. I love that philosophy. And yes, you and I have both been on sets with super micromanaging directors, and that usually doesn't come out with a great finished product.
Unfortunately, and the cast gets really frustrated because, a lot of times, especially in TV, especially if it's an episodic drama series, these actors have been playing it very likely for more than 5 years and already have these characters and how they would shoot it, how they would block it, et cetera, et cetera. So it was very, very cool to watch Frank Oz discuss the making of this movie just a little bit, because the documentary is only 6 minutes long. I wish it were longer, but I've watched the making of Bowfinger a few times, and I've watched him on set because Frank Oz is not only a director, he is a master puppeteer and voice actor, because we have Senator Palpatine and the Emperor in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and Frank Oz is the voice of fucking Yoda.
Yeah, that's right. Holy shit. I totally
and he puppeteered Yoda.
That.
Unbelievable.
Oh,
and he was the voice, of course, of Miss Piggy from the Muppets.
Oh my God, that I never connected that Frank Oz with being director.
Oh yeah, when I realized who he actually was, and I was like, wait a minute, I've seen that name Frank Oz before.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me! Like, what a freaking talent! Like, just so awesome. And crazily enough, he has done Grover and Cookie Monster for Sesame Street also.
Aww.
So Frank Oz, yeah, he's been all over the place, and he's done a couple voices for Disney. He did a voice in Monsters Incorporated. The guy has 156 acting credits.
Awesome. I'm so glad we're talking about him.
Oh, me too. And I am definitely going to have to throw a Bowfinger on my list, because that is I love that movie so much. I think I've seen it 3 or 4 times. It is such a homage to making independent film that, you got to see it.
Sounds good. I'll actually put on another Steve Martin movie to pair with it then.
Ah, perfect. There we go. That'll be fun. Now, I know I mentioned that this movie was based off of a previous screenplay called Bedtime Story, but around the time that Dancing in the Street, the music video from 1985 with Mick Jagger and David Bowie came out, the studios and Mick Jagger and David Bowie were trying to get a movie off the ground with Mick Jagger and David Bowie playing these two characters.
Wow, that would have been such a different vibe.
Oh yeah, big time.
But an opportunity to mention David Bowie, who is one of our Easter eggs on this show.
Yes, he is, exactly. We haven't mentioned him in a long time, so it felt good to get that out.
Yeah.
There was also a stage play musical version of this movie, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, that opened on March 3rd of 2005. It ran for 627 performances.
Whoa.
And was nominated for 3 Tony Awards, Best Musical, Book, and Score.
Oh, shit. So it was like a legit good Broadway show.
Yeah, and now I'm like, where's the DVD Blu-ray release? I want to see this. I would love to check it out. And going back to Mick Jagger and David Bowie being discussed to star in this movie, several other actors were also in talks to be paired up together. Originally, this was going to be called King of the Mountain or Dirty Rotten Criminals. And it's funny because I remember seeing this movie at like Amoeba, even Best Buy, and I was like, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. The title of the movie just made me feel like it would be some R-rated, like raunchy sex comedy for whatever reason. And it's a PG-rated movie. I don't think there's even a swear word in this movie. Like watching it this time around, they might have said hell or damn it. I don't recall any real bad language in this movie. I think it's PG because of certain subject matter scenes with Glenn Headley, but they're not even like gratuitous or anything like that. So it's definitely more of an adult story. It's not like this is going to be a G-rated movie and kids are going to be like, oh, that movie's so funny. You know, it's more of an adult-oriented comedy, which I guess the PG rating system had to come with. But anyway, going back to its original titles of King of the Mountain, Dirty Rotten Criminals, early stages, Rowan Atkinson, John Cleese, Richard Dreyfuss, Eric Idle, Dudley Moore, Leslie Nielsen, and Gene Wilder were all in talks to play Lawrence, who ultimately went to Michael Caine.
John Cleese
Yes.
and Richard Dreyfuss are the two I could see out of that list.
I feel like Gene Wilder could have done it too.
He's too
silly. I feel like he could have. He is very silly, I know. And thank you very much for that box of DVDs because Blazing Saddles was in there.
Absolutely.
I agree with you, but I don't know. It could have been fun.
I think Gene Wilder could have made a good Freddy.
Yeah, I could see that. Especially, getting it when they had to slick Steve Martin's hair back. If they did that to Gene Wilder, that actually would have been pretty funny.
That would have been great.
Eddie Murphy was originally offered the role of Freddie Benson. He did end up passing on the role, which in a way I'm okay with that. You know, we love Eddie Murphy. We did Trading Places. I feel like maybe the reason he passed on it was because Trading Places was literally right before this.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
This is the third of 5 collaborations that Frank Oz and Steve Martin did together. Bowfinger, there's a film called House Sitter from 1992.
Okay.
The film from 1986 with Rick Moranis and the big Venus flytrap, Little Shop of Horrors.
Yes.
And the Muppet movie, of course.
Of course.
And Little Shop of Horrors is actually a pretty good movie. I saw that, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. Amy sat me down and we watched it. I had a good time with it. It was fun.
My sourdough starter is named Audrey after the plant from Little Shop of Horrors because I always need to feed it.
Nice. Filming for this movie began on June 6th of 1988 and wrapped August 16th, 1988. 71 days to shoot this movie.
Wow, that's a nice tight schedule.
A nice tight schedule indeed, but I gotta tell you, when I saw 71, I, for whatever reason, thought this might have been like a 45 to 50 day shooting schedule.
Yeah, I could see that, especially because there's no action sequences, very little stunts. I mean, it's pretty
Very
tight.
little.
I agree. I think it could have been made in 50 days, but I think because there's so many exterior shots and they have to get permits and background and all that set up, it makes sense it might take a little longer, especially on the French Riviera.
Yeah, I agree. And my gosh, what a gorgeous location. And just how difficult must that have been to wake up to every day?
That's probably why it was actually a 71-day shoot, because nobody wanted to leave.
That's very true. Yeah, oh, God. Yeah, I don't know if this actually... We gotta do some more
reshoots. You were wearing the wrong shoes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you were wearing the wrong shoes. You put the glasses on weird. Can we reshoot that scene? I feel like if I were any one of these two guys, and I was staying near the locations of which this movie was shot, I would definitely not be in my hotel room 90% of the time. I would literally be there to sleep and shower, and then, if my call time was like 9 a.m., I'd be at the cafe right across the street from all the production trucks, and literally would just tell the PA or the second AD, like, hey, that's where I'll be. You just come get me. They've got a table for me, and it's just come get me anytime we're ready, because I'm going to be eating croissants and drinking wine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I could not find anything about the budget for this movie. Now, being 1988, Michael Caine, Steve Martin, two very well-established actors.
I would think that it was around $35 million.
That's what I was thinking about roughly, yeah. It's a nice little tasty budget.
Yeah, it is, especially for the 80s. I mean, Ghostbusters in 1984 was around $35 million. Scrooge, that came out the same year, which you picked a couple weeks ago, same.
Yes.
So 20 to 30 million then, but because of the locations, I would think around 30.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that one. This film was released on December 14th of 1988.
Oh, a holiday season release. That's a choice.
Yeah, it is. But, if you think about it, the fact that they ended up finishing the movie in August.
Yeah, that's
this is a quick
crazy
turnaround for this movie.
Yeah. Well,
but it also makes sense.
Yeah, they didn't have a lot of work to do in post, that's for sure.
No, definitely not.
Probably just mostly ADR.
I was going to say ADR for a lot of the exterior shots because of all the cars driving by.
Yeah, just a lot of voiceover re-recording work for Steve Martin and Michael Caine.
The opening weekend box office for this film was $3.8 million.
Aw, bummer.
And the total box office intake for Dirty Rotten Scoundrels was $42 million.
That's too bad.
Not great, especially if we're estimating what the budget might have been and very likely could have been.
Anywhere between 20 and 30 means that it wasn't successful.
Yeah, which is a problem, but you think about now, a lot of people do know this movie, a lot of people are fans of it, not just you and myself and my wife, but I know a lot of people that are big fans of this, so I hope that our audience will enjoy listening to the minimal behind the scenes that I got for this movie, because it is a great film. I had a great time revisiting it, and I'm really glad that I was able to bring it to the podcast.
Yes, me too, and given there were VHS sales, and now I would even almost consider this a cult classic.
I would agree with you.
I think you could classify it as successful in an underrated way.
Definitely, yeah. And what's crazy is we're in 2025 now, so in another 3 years, this movie will be 40 years old.
Oh, gosh. Wow.
Yeah, I know. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I did anyway.
Well, that just means that it's over 30 short from 40, like the both of us.
Hey, there we go. Now, the highest grossing film of 1988 was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I just did 1988 with my pick of Scrooged a few weeks ago. And the 60th highest grossing film of 1988, box office-wise, was my pick of this week of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Hey, at least it was top 100.
So that is my pick for this week, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. If you care to check it out, if you have not, it is streaming on MGM+. V and I both don't know anybody that has it, but maybe you can be the first one. Or you can rent it on Apple for $3.99. I watched my wife's DVD copy. And now I think it's time to switch things over and go to Palm Beach. V, what do you say?
Yes, let's follow along some cleaner, less scoundrelly guys. Because, in fact, this pair is very wholesome.
Oh, yeah.
Because I picked a film that came out 8 years after yours, in 1996. This stars Robin Williams and Nathan Lane. This is The Birdcage.
All right.
One of my all-time favorite comedies. I've been watching this movie since it came out. I love this film. I hope you all do too. I'm very excited to talk about it this week.
I am looking forward to it as well. This was the second time I've ever seen The Birdcage.
I cannot believe that. I'm so glad I gave you an opportunity to revisit it then.
As am I.
The Birdcage, like your film, is actually a remake.
Oh, no kidding. I did not know that.
It is a remake of a French film called La Cage aux Fous, which means birdcage, and I apologize. French is the hardest language for me, so I'm sorry if I butchered that in any way. The Birdcage starts out following along a gay couple in Palm Beach, Florida, Armand and Albert. Robin Williams plays Armand, the straight man of the couple, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
No pun intended. And Nathan Lane plays Albert, his partner, who's a little bit more flamboyant, and they actually own a drag club. And this movie opens up right smack in the middle of a very large, very successful drag show, and it sounds like that they are delaying things a little bit, unfortunately, because the star of the show, Starina, is not on stage. And we follow Robin Williams walking through and saying hi to everybody in this club. And he goes upstairs as Armand and opens a door. And we're introduced to Albert. And it turns out Albert is, in fact, Starina. And Albert is extremely dramatic, saying how I can't go on this stage. I'm so old. I'm so ugly. I can't handle it. And of course, Armand is there to try to calm Albert down. And the exchange with them right off the bat, they have fantastic chemistry. It's hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
Don't use that tone to me.
What tone?
That sarcastic, contemptuous tone that means you know everything because you're a man and I know nothing because I'm a woman.
You're not a woman.
Oh, you bastard.
And that's what you're in for with The Birdcage. It's nonstop laughs. But what happens to these two men is even though they run a successful drag club, Armand actually convinces Albert to go on and do his performance that night. They actually have a son named Val. This is actually a son from Armand's previous relationship, and Armand and Albert raised him. He comes home from college and announces to his parents that he's engaged. We then cut over to his fiancée, Barbara, played by a very young-looking Callista Flockhart.
Oh, yeah.
She's supposed to be like 19 in this movie. She was actually 30.
Oh, my God.
She looked so young.
Are you serious? She looks so young.
She looks like she's 16 in this movie.
She looks definitely not 30.
No, she doesn't. And her parents are the Keeleys, played by Gene Hackman and Diane Wiest.
Yes.
Senator Keeley, played by Gene Hackman, actually co-founded the Coalition for Moral Order, and this couple and this family are basically the polar opposite of the couple we were just introduced to.
Big time.
Well, unfortunately for Senator Keeley, his co-founder of the Coalition for Moral Order has just died in the middle of a transaction with an underage black sex worker. Basically, the worst scandal that you can think of for a conservative man who is co-founding an organization like that. And so now Senator Keeley and his wife Louise are trying to clean up this mess. And what better way to do it than to celebrate the upcoming marriage between Val and Barbara? It takes a second for Barbara to convince her parents that she's engaged and it's okay, and even though she's young, she's in love and she knows what she's doing. But once she does convince her parents that this is happening, Louise says, "Oh, well, I think this is just a great idea because this will shore up your image as an upright family man, and we just have to make sure and meet these parents that they're okay with this engagement even though we've had this scandal. Let's go ahead and go down to Florida and meet them to make sure that we can announce that you two are getting married." So that's what happens. The Keeleys go down to Florida. Barbara tells them that they are in fact a straight couple. Yeah. He is an attaché to Greece.
Oh, yes.
And she informs Val that they're coming down to Florida. Val then has to convince his dads to try to tone things down and maybe even hide who they are in order for this marriage to go forward and this couple who are very conservative to have a successful visit. And Val is actually able to do that. He is able to convince his dad, Armand, played by Robin Williams, and his other dad, Albert, played by Nathan Lane, to completely change the look of the house and even change the look of each other in order to make this dinner happen. And what proceeds is hijinks after hijinks of them trying to figure out how to make this work, what to do with Albert, maybe even involve Val's birth mother, played wonderfully by Christine Baranski. She's a great little addition to this movie. And we just talked about her in your pick of How the Grinch Stole Christmas 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I love this movie so much. It's got so much heart. It stands up. The jokes are still comedy gold from 1996. This movie's nearly 30 years old and it's still fantastic. Like I said, it's one of my all-time favorite comedies. I revisit it every other year, I would say. And
Nice.
I just absolutely love it. I still talk about it on a regular basis. I still quote it all the time. Whenever I'm thinking about taking an aspirin, I'm always like, oh, my Pirin tablets, because Armand
I scraped off the A and the M, or what is I scraped off the A and the S, or something like that.
Because Armand and Albert have actually a houseboy, I guess is a good way to put it, played by Hank Azaria, a very fit, very hot Hank Azaria, actually. Well, during the dinner, because they're supposed to be Greek attachés, he plays Agador Spartacus. But instead, he is actually Guatemalan, and he's talking to Armand about wanting to be in his drag show. And he tells Armand, "Oh, are you afraid of my Guatemalanness?" His voice and his accent in this movie are so good.
Armand, why don't you let me be in the show? Come on, aren't you afraid of my Guatemalanness?
Your what?
My Guatemalanness, my natural heat. You're afraid I'm too primitive, right? To be on the stage with your little estrogen rockettes, right?
Oh, yes, you're right. I'm afraid of your heat.
And yes, there are so many great one-liners in this film, and I'm so happy to have you revisit it. I can't believe you've only seen it twice, but hopefully it's not the last time, and you'll be excited to watch this again in the future, too.
Oh, yeah, this will definitely be a revisited movie again. I think I watched it for the first time, like 5 years ago or something like that. It might have been on streaming, or I might have rented it, because all I had ever heard about it was that it was hysterical, and it's just an all-around good movie, and I definitely love me some Robin Williams. I think Nathan Lane's fantastic. Hank Azaria always cracks me up. And of course, we love Gene Hackman as well. So the cast was definitely enough to get me to watch the movie. And the first time I watched it, I laughed my ass off. And this time around, I also laughed my ass off. There's so many funny, hysterical moments. And not just in the opening sequence, it just continues on for the full hour, 40 minutes. They don't even really hit the brakes on this movie.
Mm-hmm.
They just go full force with it. I love the scene where Nathan Lane is telling Robin Williams about the fact that he found, a chilled bottle of wine in the fridge and he only drinks red wine. So you're seeing somebody new. And then, that whole thing was very entertaining. And
What do you do when I'm busting my ass out on that stage? Nothing. I just lie here.
Yeah. And later on, when Armand tells Albert, that they've got to straight it up, and they're at breakfast, and he's like, "This is how straight men hold their toast. They smear their butter, and like they're practicing the walk of a straight man." And as the movie goes on, it just gets even more outrageous. Gene Hackman in this movie cracks me up, especially even towards the end. So definitely a revisitable movie for me. I don't think Amy's watched it with me either time, but I think she would enjoy it. It was great seeing Christy Baranski in this thing too, and like hearing about the relationship between her and Armand was pretty entertaining. So overall, for 1996, the fact that it is still hilarious is definitely a testament. And I was glad to revisit it. So thanks for having it on the podcast.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad to hear that. And the chemistry between all of these actors, including Gene Hackman, like you said, I think is paramount for this movie to be so successful. And the fact that it's consistently funny throughout the whole entire film. There are no low points. It keeps hitting the mark again and again and again. And you can talk about jokes towards the end of the movie that are as good and as funny as jokes in the beginning of the movie, like when Armand and Albert are practicing for their next show, and Armand is trying to explain to this dancer how to make this dance work.
You do an eclectic celebration of the dance. You do fussy, fussy, fussy. You do Martha Graham, Martha Graham, Martha Graham. Or Twyla, Twyla, Twyla. Or Michael Kidd, Michael Kidd, Michael Kidd, Michael Kidd. Or Madonna, Madonna, Madonna. But you keep it all inside.
And it was actually Mike Nichols, the director, who suggested the ad lib at the end for Robin saying, "But you keep it all inside."
Yes. Hank Azaria was so funny in this movie. Oh my gosh, I completely forgot that he was in it.
She works hard for the money.
Yeah, that whole thing was great. And then when he's being kicked out, he's like, "Come on, Gloria." Like, his voice is so ridiculous.
And I think another reason why we love this film, I'm glad that you share the love as well with me for this movie. It's also because of the actors in it. We've picked movies from every single one of these actors before.
That's true. Yeah, we have.
For Robin, we actually have an entire episode dedicated to him, episode 118, where I picked What Dreams May Come and you picked Insomnia for celebrating his birthday last year.
Yes.
He also has a great cameo in Tu Wong Fu, my pick for episode 122.
Oh, yeah.
Nathan Lane voices Timon in
Yes.
The Lion King, which you picked recently.
Absolutely.
He also has a very good cameo in a comedy because he's has a cameo in Goldmember when he is the stand-in for Beyonce.
Oh my God, the whole Floxy. Oh, that shit is so good.
Oh.
So funny.
Wait, who are you? It's me, Foxy Cleopatra.
I love when he clips his finger and he's like, "Ow!" Like,
yeah, and they both say "ow." Yeah, so good.
oh my God.
And
I'm using this cat as a distraction.
And Hank Azaria, he's made all of his money, I'm sure, from The Simpsons.
Oh yeah.
He's an incredible voice actor. He is the voice of not only a ton of bit characters in that show, but also Mo, Chief Wiggum, Superintendent Chalmers, the comic book guy, Apu, Dr. Nick, Duffman. He
does a lot of the Simpsons voices.
Oh, and those are just the recognizable ones. There is a humongous list on IMDb of all the different characters he's played on the 767 episodes that he's been a part of for The Simpsons.
Well, he was just on Tuned In with Jim Cummings, and that episode is pretty awesome. I would recommend anybody listen to that. That's one of my favorite podcasts next to How Did This Get Made?
And
Hank Azaria's
ours?
career. Well, yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Yes, of course, ours. But one that I listen to anyway. Yes, ours. It was a really, really cool episode, and listening to how he got his start, and he talks about some of the voices that he does, but he talks about a lot of his live action roles too.
Nice.
And because he's been in a lot of movies, obviously not only this one, he was in the 1998 Godzilla and American Sweethearts, and so many other movies where he's actually on screen.
My God, I forgot about him being in America's Sweethearts as Catherine Zeta-Jones' new boyfriend.
Yep, he was probably the only funny part in that movie because that movie sucks.
It does. He was the only funny part. I totally agree with you.
But yeah, he's a very talented guy. Absolutely.
Yeah, he was also in Night at the Museum movies, actually with Robin Williams again.
Was he really?
Yeah, he's the Egyptian king.
Oh, wow. Oh, damn. I haven't seen any of those movies. I saw all three of them, but I haven't seen any of them probably since theaters. It's been a long time since I visited a Night at the Museum movie.
He was also in the show Friends as Phoebe's nerdy science boyfriend, David. And he was in my previous pick of Dodgeball because he's young Patches O'Houlihan in the little training video of Dodgeball.
That's right. Oh my gosh. And he always has a different voice in everything he's done.
Everything, yeah.
Like, I don't know, maybe in Friends was the only time he's ever used his real voice, because in Godzilla he has a really terrible New York accent. Dodgeball, he's got that, like, plus, if you're going to play dodgeball, like, he's got that weird voice. Oh my gosh. So funny.
Hank Azaria is great. And Gene Hackman is very serious in this movie as conservative Senator Keeley. He's been in a bunch of our picks, actually, unintentionally. He was in Enemy of the State, your early pick. The Replacements, a more recent pick from you.
Yeah.
Crimson Tide, my pick from episode 15. And Unforgiven, your pick from episode 9.
Hell yeah. Love me some Hackman.
Oh my God. And The French Connection. And Young Frankenstein.
Oh my gosh. He's been all over our podcast.
Yes.
I'll never forget when I was like, do you recognize him? While we were watching Young Frankenstein, you're like, is that Gene Hackman? Like, yes, it is.
Awesome.
I was going to make espresso.
That's such a good little bit part for him. Yeah, we love Gene Hackman. Unfortunately, he has retired, but he has a fantastic filmography that I'm sure we will continue to talk about, especially because he'll be in my future pick of Get Shorty at some point.
Ah, there we go.
Diane Weiss plays his wife, Louise, and she was in Practical Magic, my pick from episode 82.
Oh, yeah.
One of the aunts with Stockard Channing.
Hell yeah.
She plays the mom in a lot of things. She was in Edward Scissorhands, Footloose, and The Lost Boys.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and Dan Futterman plays Val, Armand and Albert's son. He actually hasn't done as much acting as he's done writing, because even though he was in a long-running TV series called Judging Amy, he has been nominated for 2 Oscars in writing.
What?
He wrote Foxcatcher.
Whoa.
And Capote.
Oh my gosh. Oh wow. I haven't seen Foxcatcher, but Capote is fantastic.
Foxcatcher is also fantastic. I've seen that.
I've heard.
That's funny because I haven't seen Capote.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Dan Futterman went the writing route and is really fantastic at it.
That is badass. And he hasn't won any of the Oscars?
No, he was just nominated.
Well, still, though, that's pretty badass.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I were a writer or a director and I got nominated, I would definitely cliche and be like, it's an honor just to be nominated, because it fucking is.
Oh, hell yeah. I would talk about that all the time. It's Oscar-nominated V. McClure.
Yeah.
And Callista Flockhart, she was Ally McBeal for years and years and years on television. Great show.
That's right.
She was also in Brothers and Sisters and Supergirl. She crushed it in television. In 2002, she met Harrison Ford at the Golden Globes, and they've been married since 2010.
Nice.
Christine Baranski, we love her on this show. She was in your pick for 2 weeks ago in The Grinch, like I said. She was also in Addams Family Values, my pick from a couple years ago. She's Becky Martin Granger, the head of that summer camp that Wednesday gets sent to. And she's also in a movie you love, Chicago. She plays the journalist.
Yes. Oh, that's right.
And lastly, Grant Heslov plays a really sleazy tabloid photographer in this movie.
Oh, yeah. When I saw him come on screen, I was like, no way. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Grant Heslov was in your pick of True Lies. He's the guy in the van with Tom Arnold. He's great in that movie.
Oh, yeah.
But Grant Heslov is actually more successful as a producer and a director because he has produced most of George Clooney's films.
Mm-hmm.
He also produced The Boys in the Boat and Argo. And he's directed all of George Clooney's Nespresso commercials.
Oh, all right. That's pretty cool. Yeah. We can't forget about his fantastic comedic starring role in the film starring The Rock, The Scorpion King.
Oh my God, I forgot he was in that.
Yeah, I know. That's why I made the joke of we can't forget.
Oh, well, we forget that whole film because it's so terrible.
Yeah, pretty bad. Nothing against you, Grant, but that movie is not good. But he was pretty funny. I mean, he was the comic relief that was somewhat funny.
He's also in Congo.
He's also in Dante's Peak.
Oh my God, he is. He's in so many bad films.
He's the coffee guy in Dante's Peak. He's always like, coffee, 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 anytime Linda Hamilton shows up with it.
No wonder
but she's really just bringing it for Pierce Brosnan.
I mean, I would too.
Yeah, me too.
I would also bring it for Linda Hamilton, though. So there's that.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
But that makes sense why Grant Heslov then went to producing and directing, because
probably
those certainly weren't nominated for any Oscars.
No, they were not.
And Elaine May wrote the English version of this screenplay. She also wrote Primary Colors, Ishtar.
Oh.
She was an uncredited writer on Tootsie, your pick from a little while ago.
Oh, very cool.
and Heaven Can Wait. So she wrote some good films.
Oh, with Warren Beatty.
Yes, and then they remade it
And Charles
with...
Grodin.
Yes, and then
Yeah.
they remade it with Chris Rock.
And Regina King.
Oh my God, yeah. Love her.
Yeah, Down to Earth. I saw that in theaters, and I saw it a few times after, and
Yeah, I like the original better.
absolutely.
Mike Nichols directed this film. He was born in 1931, and unfortunately he passed away in 2014 at the age of 83.
Oh, wow.
He directed a lot of really good films. He directed Charlie Wilson's War, Closer, a movie I will never watch again, even though it's very good.
That's one of those movies I need to rewatch. I took a girl on a date to see Closer.
Oh.
And we were still in high school. We didn't go out again. And I don't think it was because of Closer, but
It
now that I
wasn't.
think about it, it probably was.
Yeah, it wasn't not because of Closer.
No. Yeah.
Oh,
No,
that's rough.
yeah. But I do love Charlie Wilson's War. That movie is pretty awesome.
Yes, and Primary Colors, Wolf with Jack Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer. Regarding Henry with Harrison Ford, funny enough.
Nice.
Working Girl, Silkwood, and The Graduate.
The Graduate, yeah.
Yeah,
Not a bad movie. Working Girl, is that the... Oh, no. I always get Working Girl and Milk Money mixed up because they both have Melanie Griffith.
I always get Working Girl and 9 to 5 mixed up
Yeah, gotcha.
because they both take place in an
I know.
office building with shitty bosses.
I never saw Working Girl, but I did see Milk Money, and I was always jealous of those little boys. But, I know for a fact Melanie Griffith did not flash them because that would have been real problematic.
Well, that's just a weird-ass movie, but...
It is a weird fucking movie.
It's
It is, with Ed
weird.
Harris, too.
God, it's a weird movie.
weird one.
Yeah, I
I
don't know.
have worked with Melanie Griffith, though. She's a sweetheart. She is a real sweetheart.
Well, Working Girl has Sigourney Weaver and Harrison Ford in it, along with Melanie Griffith. It will be on the list at some point in the future.
Okay,
And Silkwood
sweet.
will, too. So we'll talk about Mike Nichols again, for sure.
Perfect.
And before they made this film, Mike Nichols asked Rick McKay, who was a PBS producer, to spend a couple months going to Paris, London, San Francisco, and Atlanta to make a feature-length documentary about drag queens.
Oh, wow.
Rick McKay did it. He did thorough research to find drag queens all over the world to interview and film in performance, and the finished documentary was used to train Nathan Lane and Robin Williams on how to be drag queens and how to act.
No way.
Yeah, which I want to see that
That's
documentary.
pretty wild.
And I love the style of filming when it happens, the continuous shot, or at least something that looks like the continuous shot, widely used in the film 1917, a movie that will be on our podcast at some point in the future.
Yeah.
Also used for that incredible fight scene in Atomic Blonde,
Oh, yeah.
the opening of Children of Men,
Yes.
pick of yours, that also stars Michael Caine in it.
Hey.
And the 2-minute opening sequence to the Birdcage also looks like one continuous shot. And Mike Nichols did that on purpose, and I think it looks great.
It really does. It kind of reminded me of the shot in Goodfellas where Henry brings Karen down into the back of the restaurant.
Yes! Great example, especially because most of the time we're following Robin Williams through this club saying hello to everyone. Perfect analogy. Yeah.
I love that scene's great because one of the guys comes and goes, "Hey, Armand, we have the Kennedys over there." He's like, "Which one?" And it's not the one he wants. And he's like, "Should we give him free drinks?" Coffee.
And Mike Nichols, just similar to your movie, Mike Nichols insisted that Nathan Lane and Robin Williams film at least one good take adhering to the script of each scene before he would allow them to start improvising.
Very cool.
Because both of them are famous for their improvisation, and they just went off about the whole thing.
That's awesome.
Oh my God, like when Nathan Lane's being all sassy as Albert, and he's talking to that dancer, and oh God, just listen to this.
He's chewing gum.
Chewing gum helps me think.
Sweetie, you're wasting your gum.
Another piece of this movie that was improvised, or at least they just kept going, was when they're all in the kitchen together during dinner hosting the Keeleys, and Robin Williams
my
slips
God.
and falls.
Oh,
That was completely accidental. Robin Williams really did slip, and Hank Azaria, and Dan Futterman are all holding back laughter. And if you watch it again, you can see that they're, especially Dan Futterman, is trying not to laugh. And Hank Azaria has said that he actually based his voice on his grandmother's.
well, he did mention something about using his grandmother's voice when he was on Tuned In with Jim Cummings. So there you go. That's at least one of the times.
Nice. Okay. He was only 30 when they were filming this movie.
He looked older, honestly. I don't know
Well,
why.
it was the
Nothing
90s.
against Hank Azaria, but
'Cause
yeah.
everybody looked
it's
older
kind of
back
funny.
then.
Yeah, it's except for Calista Flockhart, apparently.
Apparently,
But
yeah.
like when Val shows up, he's like, "Oh, you're only 20." It's like 20. Okay, that's a stretch.
Yeah, he was actually 27 at the time.
Okay, well, not too far off, but
No.
definitely not 20.
But Hank Azaria and Calista Flockhart were the same age during filming of
That's
this movie, which is
pretty funny.
bonkers. Yeah. And it was his 30th birthday. Hank Azaria worked on the set of Heat until 6
Oh.
a.m. and then headed over to do this movie. And when Mike Nichols found out it was his 30th birthday and he had just been working for 18 hours straight, he sent Hank
Damn.
Azaria home, which was really nice of him.
Yeah, that's good on him.
And according to Hank Azaria, Robin Williams loved performing in front of everyone and anyone. It could be just Hank Azaria himself or a full audience. And so there was a lot of this movie. Some of it was shot on location in Florida, but a lot of it was also filmed at Paramount Studios in LA.
Awesome.
And Hank Azaria said that when most actors tend to avoid the trams of all of the tourists coming in to tour the studio, Robin Williams actually couldn't resist, and he would put on a show and with a bunch of characters for all the
That's
tourists that came
awesome.
by. That's just
That's so cool.
the kind of guy he was.
I have a similar story. I wasn't there, but one of the guys that would help us out on NCIS LA when I was on that show, he would come in on big film productions and like help, wrangle background, like large crowds of background. And he said that one of the nights he was working on Father's Day with Robin Williams and Billy Crystal. And there was a night where they were at the Hollywood Bowl, and Robin Williams at the end of production asked the entire stadium to stay and did 3 hours of stand-up for them until 3 o'clock in the morning.
Shit.
Yeah. Could you imagine being background on that? You probably were off the clock, but you get 3 hours of Robin Williams just going off. Like, that would have been so fucking awesome.
That is incredible. That's the best perk you could ever imagine being a background player.
Hell yeah.
And that actually is the scene. I know exactly what scene they're talking about. It's when they're looking for their kids, Billy Crystal and Robin Williams, in that movie.
Ah.
And that is when Mel Gibson has a cameo as this tattooed, super pierced guy, and he turns around and you're like, holy shit, it's Mel Gibson.
Oh
It's
my
such
God.
a good cameo. It's great.
I've never seen Father's Day, so maybe you'll have to throw it on the list.
I have only seen it a couple times when I was much, much younger. I have no idea if it holds up.
Oh, all right. Oh, maybe I'll check it out on my own one day.
Yeah. And on a more serious note, when Gene Hackman is trying to sneak off and out of his house from all the reporters after this scandal drops, he actually tries to exit out the window of his house and down this ladder. And unfortunately, all of the reporters find him. And he just bumbles through this ad-lib speech that he's trying to give these reporters. And when he says goodbye, he puts up the peace signs, kind of like Richard Nixon, right?
Right.
Gene Hackman himself was on Nixon's enemies list back in the 70s.
What?
Yeah.
No way.
Super badass. I have no idea why, but that is so cool.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And director Paul Thomas Anderson has said that this movie is one of the 2 films that without question will make me stop dead in my tracks and watch all the way through to the very end, no matter what else is happening or needs to get done.
Wow. Nice.
The other film is The Shining,
Oh, damn. Hell yeah.
which both are now my picks, and Paul Thomas Anderson and I should be friends.
Yeah, you definitely should.
We have good taste in movies.
That's for sure.
And during that scene with Robin Williams and Nathan Lane, when they're trying to butch each other up and you smear the toast and all this stuff,
Yes.
and then Nathan Lane freaks out. Mike Nichols had to be covered with a sound blanket because he was laughing too loud. Which
That's awesome.
that has happened a couple times on sets that I've been working on, especially, oh man, there was this independent movie that I was doing stunt coordination on, and these guys were training for MMA, and there was the comedic relief, this actor who was playing one of their best friends. And I remember we kept trying to redo this take where he tries to work out too, and all of us could not stop laughing. We actually had to leave set and just have the director and me and the cameraman there because we were all just could not hold it in. And it happens. Yeah. People are just too funny and the crew just like can't help but break.
Happened to me on Front Cover too. We had a guy on set one day that just, our camera people literally, they set the camera up, started recording, and had to leave because the guy just we kept blowing the takes. It happens every now and then, and it's really cool when it does happen.
It is.
I
And
mean, well, like to an extent, it's pretty cool.
yeah, and I would think that it's a compliment to these actors, right? I mean, if they can break professionals who see stuff like this all the time, then they're doing something right.
Definitely.
So now that I've talked about the cast, I can say it's made up of 4 different Oscar winners.
Awesome.
And this movie was nominated for Best Art Direction Set Decoration, which makes sense because since they were filming at the Paramount lot, these sets were great. The apartment and everything. Oh, those are fantastic.
Definitely.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about some links to your movie.
Oh, all right.
As we've said, both of these are actually remakes. Another connection, though, is that Robin Williams was originally cast as the flamboyant Albert.
Ah.
However, he wanted to change because he had just come off of Mrs. Doubtfire, where he was dressing in drag. He had been in Aladdin. He was very, very out there with these characters in the early 90s, and he wanted to change it up a little bit. So he asked Mike Nichols if he could actually be Armand after Steve Martin dropped out.
Whoa.
Steve Martin was originally cast as Armand.
Damn.
Which
interesting.
Could have been great.
Yeah, that could have been.
I love Robin Williams. I think this is absolutely his role, but Steve Martin could also have killed it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And Mike Nichols agreed and recast him as Armand, and then they started looking for the Albert. And this was Nathan Lane's film debut because he's more well-known as a Broadway actor. And Steve Martin has gone on to say he regrets turning down the role, especially because he was very close friends with Robin Williams, and playing a couple together on screen would have fulfilled a goal of his to work with Robin.
Damn.
Even though they did perform on stage together, they never actually appeared in a movie together.
That's too bad.
It is, but I thought that was such a fascinating connection between our 2 films this week.
Yeah, that's actually pretty awesome. Pseudo-universe, I'd be down to watch that version.
Yeah, me too, for sure. And so that is The Birdcage that came out in 1996. It had a budget of $31 million. Speaking of $30 million budgets, that's kind of funny. However, it did do very well in the U.S. and worldwide box office because in the United States, it made $124 million.
Oh, damn.
And worldwide, it grossed $185 million.
Shit.
So it was very successful, and I'm very proud of that, especially in the 90s. These were 2 out gay men who were leading this movie. It was a drag show setting. I'm so stoked that it was as well received as it was. I think it's a great movie to revisit in 2025. And as we've both said, it still holds up beautifully.
It most certainly does.
So those are our buddy comedy picks for the week. And now comes the question, John, would you watch Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with your grandma?
I would have watched it with my grandmother. I don't know if she had seen it, but I feel like she would have enjoyed it. And V, would you watch The Birdcage with your grandmother?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen it with just about everyone in my family, actually. Like I said, I've been watching this movie since the late 90s. It's hilarious. It's very family-friendly. There's no sex in it. I don't think any cussing other than Albert saying, "You bastard."
Right, yeah. That's true, actually. For an R-rated movie, there really is not a whole lot of swear words in this movie.
No, not at all. And if you want to watch it, you can stream it if you have an HBO Max subscription.
That's how I watched it.
Fantastic. Well, that wraps up our 2nd episode of 2025. Thank you all so much for joining us. And John, do you want to tell our audience what we're doing next week?
Oh, why not? It's going to be a fun, uplifting episode, similar to today's. We are going to go down the romantic comedy route. I chose a film that my wife yet again introduced me to. This movie comes from 1959. This film stars Doris Day and Rock Hudson. This is Pillow Talk, everybody. And if you care to follow along, you can rent it on Amazon or Apple for $3.59.
That's so funny you've got a little bit of a streak going of movies that your wife introduced you to, considering she's not a movie fan.
I know. It's pretty awesome. I like that she's introduced me to so many movies.
She doesn't normally like movies in general.
Oh, yes, that's very true.
But she does have great taste, and my claim to fame is that she likes my taste in movies more than yours.
Yeah, that's true. She does. And V, what will you be choosing to pair with Pillow Talk?
Well, what else could I pick for the topic of classic rom-coms other than a movie led by Cary Grant?
Oh, here we go.
In love with that man, even to this day, and so I picked another one of his classic films. For anyone who's listened to some of our previous episodes, we've also done Arsenic and Old Lace.
Oh, yeah.
And Bringing Up Baby.
Hey.
So next week, I am choosing another one of his staples. This is a fantastic film. It's called His Girl Friday.
I've never seen it.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to introduce you to it. I've only seen it twice in my 20s, so I'm very excited to revisit it. And you can watch it along with us if you have a Prime subscription.
That is how I'll watch it.
Well, all right. Thank you all so much for joining us. In between our episodes that drop every Wednesday, you can follow us along on all the social media at Movies You Miss Pod. We love having conversations with you. Please feel free to engage with us. Let us know what new movies you've seen recently this week. And please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. It's so important and it's so helpful. If you write us a review on Apple Podcasts, we will send you a sticker.
Yeah.
So thank you all so much again. And for those of you who have joined us before, you know we love to end this podcast with film is a form of art, and in art, every opinion is valid. Except if you think
These movies this week don't hold up.
yes, I think they're getting very close to being classified as classic comedies. And until next week, bye-bye.
Cheers, everybody.